friends, it's Janet and welcome to my craft room. Today I'm going to make this beautiful card for you. It's part of the Card Hoppin, a year of fun themes and techniques. This is a monthly group that Jennifer Holder Schoolcraft puts together for us, and thank you, Jennifer, for putting together another great month. So this month's theme is where I live, and so we were asked to do something that represents where we come from. So I'm living in North Carolina, and we're well known here for our coastlines and our lighthouses. So I've created this watery nighttime scene with the lighthouse, and this one represents Bodie Island Lighthouse, which is in the Outer Banks near Nags Head, North Carolina. So this was really fun to create, and I'll show you how I did this. But before we get into it, I just want to direct you to the video description underneath my video. That's where you're going to find the rest of the participants in the hop so that you can follow the next person and watch what they did. And I guarantee you're going to get lots of creative ideas watching the designers in this hop. So I hope you'll do that. All right. Let's get started by looking at what we're going to use today for this card. First of all, I'm using my stash. This is a My Monthly Hero kit from June of 2020. Came with stamps and several dies that make scenes for the stamps that came in this kit. I'm going to use the background stamp that came in the kit, this one die, and also one of the sentiments. Now this is the background stamp. It is a Aurora Borealis background, but I'm going to use only the bottom part that has the water in it. So this is the actual die cut that I did in gray, and you can see from my pencil marks I've added some details that I'm going to go over with a marker. I've also cut some black cardstock to go behind the rocks so that it looks like we have some shading going on there, and I'll start by attaching that. That's just going to take a little bit of glue, and then that will go in the back. And like I said, this will make it look like there's some shading in the rock itself. And I'm going to darken this up too with some oxide ink so it looks even darker. Similarly, I cut a piece of bright yellow cardstock to go behind the lighthouse so that the windows would have some bright yellow showing through, indicating that someone's at home basically. And also you've got the bright yellow color coming through the lens of the lighthouse, signifying that it is on. So pretty simple. Now I'm going to bring in my Tombow chocolate twin tone marker. There are two ends on this marker. One's a very fine tip, and that's what I'm going to use to draw in some details in my keeper's house. First, I'm going to put in my roof line and the side of the house. Well, basically, I'm just outlining the whole entire house. And then I'm going to put in a few lines going from the bottom of the roof and some coming from the bottom of the house, just to give sort of an impression of wood or some kind of siding there. And I outlined the entire house that way just to make it stand out more. I'm also drawing some bricks into the bottom of the lighthouse. It's basically 3 horizontal lines with staggered vertical lines to kind of give that impression of the bricks. All right, so now I'm using my black micron fine line marker, and I'm drawing the borders of the black stripes that are going to go into the lighthouse, as well as just delineate the top of the lighthouse from the rest of it. And then I'll be able to bring in my Copic marker C7. This is a really dark gray marker, and it will look quite black actually. So I'm going to put the stripes in. And this particular lighthouse at Bodie Island has just 2 stripes like this, and then the top of it is dark. So that's why I'm kind of trying to mimic that representation. There are so many different ways that lighthouses are done. Some are kind of like a twisted ribbon going up, some are thin stripes, some don't have any stripes, but this is how Bodie Island looks. So there you go, pretty simple. I'm going to put in a little bit of shading on the roof too, just to give it a bit more dimension. Then I'm going to take some crafting tape and I'm going to mask off the lighthouse from the rocks, and I'm going to bring in a blending brush and some black soot Distress Oxide ink. And I'm going to use a Post-it note, which I will use to kind of take off some of the excess ink off my brush before I touch the die cut. And I'm just going to darken this up just a little bit because I want it to look darker and more like rock, but I don't want it to be pitch black. So this does that for me quite easily. So then I can take off the craft tape. And unfortunately, it did rip a little tiny bit of my keeper's house on the corner of it. I did recover from that by just taking my chocolate marker again and drawing in some lines. You really can't tell in the finished card that that happened, fortunately. All right, so here's my background stamp that I mentioned that came in the kit, and that waterline is about 1.25 inches in depth. So I'm going to put my masking tape following the lines that are in my glass mat so that it is about 1.25 inches from the bottom. I'm going to put a second strip just to make sure that I don't accidentally get any ink above my tape line. Now I'm going to bring in 2 more oxide inks. This is going to be Blueprint Sketch and Salty Ocean. I'll start with Salty Ocean, and I'm going to put kind of a center area in this lighter, brighter color. Again, taking a Post-it note and taking off some of that excess, although really I didn't need to, because by the time I'm done with the blending here, it wouldn't have mattered if it was a bit splotchy. Once I got that center Salty Ocean in, then I'm taking the much darker Blueprint Sketch and going around the edges. The reason being is I want the center of the water to be a bit lighter and the edges to be darker. This is just kind of naturally how it will look to the eye in nature. What's in front of you is going to be lighter than what's to the sides of you. So that's the reason. And also just to give it a little more depth. All right, now we can clean up a bit and take off the tape mask that I had applied before. And you can see this beautiful, straight, solid water line that we have now. And you can see also that pretty center area where it's a bit lighter. I'm going to turn this on the side and I'm going to mask the water now using the same strips that I used before. I can just reuse them. I'm leaving just a little bit of blue showing on the right side of that tape. And that's just going to make sure that when I apply my next colors, I don't accidentally leave a tiny strip of gray between the 2 colors. All right, so I'm going to again take this beautiful wilted violet oxide ink and I'm going to apply it right at the water line. The reason being is that I want this to look like, or suggest perhaps, that it's just as sunrise is beginning. So we just have a tiny bit of purple there at the horizon line when we get done with our card. It's just a hint. And now I'm going to use the black soot and speed this up because it's very boring. But essentially I'm just covering the entire card that remains there with black soot. Now you can see with the gray cardstock, some of that is still showing through, and it's okay. I think it just adds a little bit more to the concept or the feeling that it's a sky. It has some depth, there's some dimension because the color isn't a solid black. When I'm done, I blended in the purple a little bit more to the black. And my next step is going to be to add the white stars. Now for years I struggled with trying to figure out how to best add that nice, bright, opaque white background splatter. I've tried so many different things, I can't tell you, but this is my solution and I love it. It's using Dr. P.H. Martin's bleed proof white ink with just a little bit of water and a splatter brush from Tim Holtz. So I put this in my lovely spatter box. I've got some of that ink on the tips of my splatter brush, and I'll try to show you. I hold it and pull the bristles back. You can kind of see that, and when I do so, you're going to get all kinds of splatter occurring, and you can understand why I use that splatter box, right? But it does a great job of putting small and larger droplets of white, and that white is solid, bright white. And I really love how that works. So if that helps you guys, Give it a try. It really does work well. All right, so now I'm going to stamp the water lines in using the background stamp. So I let that white paint dry, and now I'm going to use some clear embossing powder. I'll heat that up, and that's what's going to give us that pretty shine in the water that you saw at the beginning of the video. It just makes it seem like there's a reflection. So here's my die cut again. I'm going to hang it just ever so slightly off the edge and trim off the excess. The idea being that maybe it can look like it's attached to some land. And you can see I'm sketching in the rays that are going to be coming from the lighthouse. You cannot see it in the camera, but I can see the reflection of the pencil line in person. So now I'm going to create some paint that I'm going to use to put the rays in. So we've got some bleed proof white, a little water, and then I also used Twisted Citron oxide ink. My initial thought was I'd make it a little bit more yellow, but then I didn't really like that. I thought it looked kind of dirty, so I added some more white back into my mix, and then it got a little bit more white, but not quite stark white. So that was a good kind of mid point between the bright white and sort of the sick yellow, if you will. Maybe if you made the paint much more yellow, it would be better, but I ended up just being satisfied with this kind of mid-tone white. So I'm going to just go ahead and paint in the rays coming from the lighthouse using my pencil line as the border, and I want the edges of this long one to be staggered and not just nice and neat and even, because that's not how the rays come out in real life when you're looking at it. Now the rays coming onto the right side of the card, that's going to end solidly because you obviously can't see the end of the rays on this right side, so it would make sense that you see it all the way to the edge of the card. Then I'll attach the two a little bit there, and then draw in, or paint in rather, nice even strips of color so that I don't have anything that looks like brush strokes, if you will. Now I'm going to fix this little area. I didn't mention it, but I'm sure you noticed it. When I took off my masking, a little bit of paper came off here too. So to fix this, I'm just dabbing a little bit of black soot and a tiny dab of water over this area with my brush, and it did a pretty good job of hiding that blemish. So now I'm using my anti-static powder on this light beam because I'm going to stamp on it with Versamark ink and heat emboss black powder over the top of it. Now I probably could have made this beam a little bit wider to encompass the entire sentiment, but I didn't. So it's going to hang off a tiny bit, but I don't think it really deters from the card much. I only show using the embossing ink one time, but in reality I did it about 4 times because I wanted to make absolute certain that I would get a good coverage with the black embossing powder, because it would be a shame to go through all this work and then have my sentiment not be good. So that's why I wanted to make sure, and I just inked the heck out of it. So I've got a great background now, and I can put in the lighthouse. So I'm just using my art glitter glue and setting that in so that the rays come really from the center of the lens up there at the top of the lighthouse. A tiny bit of the rock did hang over, so I'm just going to trim that little bit off. And now it looks a little bit like it's attached to some land. I'll take this opportunity to wipe off all my excess embossing static powder with a clean paper towel, and that will brighten everything up a little bit again. Now it's ready to put on my white A2 card base. I think the white is a nice contrast to the dark colors on the card, and it keeps it nice and simple and clean. This is pretty much a 1-layer card. There's nothing that I've popped up or anything here, so it will be quite nice to mail off. I'm really pressing down this card and all the edges to make sure it's well sealed onto the card base. And now to further disguise the little boo-boo that I had, I'm going to add a few more drops with my P.H. Martin bleed proof white over the top to cover it with some stars. Now, these are these tiny sequin stars that I believe probably came in this kit. I had them in my sequin stash. Off camera, I attached some of these with a little dab of glue, and you can really see how this card shines now with those sequin stars as well as the pretty water. And it glistens thanks to the clear embossing powder. Well, everybody, this finishes up my card for the Card Hoppin', a year of fun, themes, and techniques. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you haven't already, and do check out the other links in my video description to visit the other designers. Take care. Have a great day. Bye.